Welcome to Amira Academy, your path to a new career in visual effects. Starting from the fundamentals, we take you from beginner to professional in 6 months, giving you the skills and best practices to work in the visual effects industry. We'll also help you with your CV and give you advice on approaching potential employers. Maya for Visual Effects is our course for students who want to become 3D artists or learn to composite stunning imagery with our Nuke for Visual Effects course. Find out further information from our website at amiracademy.com. In this lesson, we'll take a look at this still life scene, and we're going to render it using the Arnold renderer plugin. So what we'll do first of all is we're going to set up the lights and the geometry in this lesson. So let's get started, and we'll set the project. So we'll go to File, Set Project, set it to our picnic folder which we downloaded, and then I'm going to click on Open and open up our start scene, Picnic Start. This is a Maya ASCII file, and it may give you an error like this, and that's perfectly fine. It was just recorded in a different version of Maya, so it's just giving you this error, but it should open fine. Okay, I'm using Maya 2014 at the moment. So in this scene we've got these simple objects. We've got some glasses, some grapes, a knife and board, and etc. And we've also got a camera which we're looking through. It's called the shot cam, and our resolution is set to 4:3 sort of aspect ratio. So if we were to render this just in Maya software just to see what this looks like, so we can compare, I just opened up the render view there just by pressing this button, and I'm going to press render. I'll right click and say shot cam just so that it sets it to the right camera, and this is what the render looks like from Maya software, just so we know. So I'm just going to keep that. Always good to keep your renders. And then we'll load up our Arnold renderer plugin. So we'll go to Window, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and you'll see all these different plugins here. So we're just going to close that, and we'll scroll down to M2A, which is the Arnold plugin, and we'll just load that up. And if you want it to load up every time you start up Maya, you can click on Auto Load, which we do want, and then we'll render that. So I'm going to go back to my render view and just press render again. But before I do that, actually, let's just change over to Arnold renderer first. So click on there, switch over to Arnold renderer, and then we'll press render. Okay, so that took 19 seconds, and it's black because the default light does not get translated in the Arnold plugin. So it's completely black, and this is what we had before. So we're going to have to create a light first of all, and I'm just going to make this render smaller as well. So I'm going to go to Options, Test Resolution, and I'm just going to say 50% just so it renders a little bit quicker. So let's first of all create a light. So I'm going to go to Arnold, Lights, and we'll create an area light. Okay, you can also do that through the Arnold shelf here, and this button here is the area light. Okay, so you can see in my outliner here I've got my area light, and I've selected it by default when it's created. So if you don't deselect, you can go to Panel and then Look Through Selected, and now we're looking through the light. If you weren't selecting it, you can just select it in the outliner. Okay, so now I can use my view controls to move this around. So if you notice with the default light, it comes straight out of the camera, and it's very boring. So you want to make sure that you are at an angle to the camera, and so this is through the camera, this is through the light here. So the camera is here, as you can see. So I'm just going to come to the side and a little bit behind these grapes, and I'm not going to go too far away because I don't want it to be too dark. So let's have a look. I'm going to go back to my shot cam here, and then let's take a look at this render. Go back to my render view, and let's press render. Okay, so it's still black, and this is what you'd expect. And the reason is because Maya by default, Arnold by default, will have a quadratic fall off, meaning that the further away it is, the faster the light falls off, and so by the time it reaches these objects, it's decayed. So what we need to do is increase the intensity. If you look at the alpha here, you can see that the objects are there, they're just black, so there's no problem. So what I'm going to do is use the IPR, and we'll slowly increase the intensity and the exposure. If you haven't already selected your area light, you can do so using the outliner here and just click on it. Okay, and we're just looking at the attributes here. So this section here is what we're going to look at. I'm going to click on IPR, and IPR will give you an interactive session, and you can change parameters in real time and see them update. So if I increase my exposure, we can start to see some results as we increase this above 10, as you can see. Now I'm just going to compare. If I had my exposure on 15, for example, it looks like this, which is quite nice. And if I had my intensity on 15 and my exposure on 1, the difference, you can see it's completely dark. So exposure is kind of measured in f-stops, and so it doubles the amount of light, so it's kind of different to intensity. So I tend to use that more than using intensity. I just leave intensity on 1, or sometimes I do a multiplier if it's a really large scene, like 1,000 or something, and then I adjust the exposure because it's more intuitive. So I'm going to set that to 15, and that's a pretty good result. So you can see with the IPR it gives you a coarse render, and then it sort of starts to clean that up, and depending on how fast your computer is, you may not get such interactive results. I'm using a MacBook Pro at the moment, if you want to know which one I'm using. So now that we can see something, let's keep this result. Okay, so one of the main things I wanted to show you about an area light is that, just like in real life, the larger the light is, the softer the shadows will be. So at the moment we're getting pretty sharp shadows, as you can see, so what we want to do is we want to smooth those out and kind of really model these objects. And notice how, because the light is at quite a strong angle, you can see the shape of these objects better than if you had it coming out of the camera like this. Okay, notice how the default render of an Arnold render is pretty nice. It's already got bounce light, so it's already got one bounce in the render, and you can see here that's going on because the light is coming from here, it's bouncing, and then we're getting some bounce light coming up. So we're getting really nice results straight out of the boxes. So let's make this look even better by increasing the scale of our light. So I'll select my area light, which I've already done here, and go to the transform node, change the scale to 30, and let's see the results. So now you can see we've got a much softer result if I compare the previous render. This edge here is nice, and this edge has got a nice gradient, and this edge here is nice and soft as well, so that's much better. And you can increase that if you want. Depending on where you placed your light, you might need to increase your intensity, your exposure even more. If you're further away, you'd have to increase that beyond 15 if you're further away. So I'm going to leave it on 15 for now, and I'm going to leave my scale on 30. And then we'll create our next light. So this is our key light, and that's our main light. And we're going to fill in some of these darker areas and make the render look a bit more interesting by creating a sky dome. Now a sky dome is basically a light coming from all around, and you can apply an image to it, and that will make the scene look completely different. So let's keep this render, and we're going to create a light from the Arnold menu, Lights, Sky Dome Light, and it's going to be completely blown out when you first create it because it's just white. Quite an easy way of getting a kind of ambient occlusion look to your render, but we're going to get some color in there by applying an image in the color setting here. So we're just going to click on the checker, we'll go to File, click on File. This is in 2D textures, by the way. Then we'll click in this folder, and I'm going to go to Background. I'm going to choose Background Low. Click on Open. By the way, this isn't a 360-degree view, but it will do for our purposes because it's got almost 50% sky and 50% land, so it does give you a decent result. So I'm going to say Open, and now you can see we're getting some colour. Just let this finish. Okay, so now it's finished, and we'll keep that render. Let's compare. So this is without any fill light, and this is with fill light, so you can see it looks a bit nicer, depending on what you're going for. We're getting some green fill light there from the mountains, which is nice, and we're getting a little bit of blue as well. If you want to see this a bit clearer, let's hide our area light, and then we can see the effect of this. So I'm going to go to Outliner and hide our area light, and now you can see the effect of just the sky dome. So this is just from the image, and that's the difference. Okay, so just to give you an example, I'm going to just put another image in here. It's just a HDR that I've downloaded. It's quite a famous one called Kitchen Probe from Paul Debevec's site. You can download any HDRs, just do a quick search on Google and try this out. So the cool thing about the sky dome light is it's importance sampled. That means that it's going to take the image and it's going to look at the brightest areas, and if there are really bright areas in there, it's going to put more samples on there. So it means that you get accurate shadows without much tuning. So it's really nice. So if we go to our texture, and this time I'm going to pick this HDR, and this won't be included because I can't redistribute this, but you can download it quite easily from Paul Debevec's site. And I'm going to go to where I save this, Kitchen Probe. This is what it looks like. And now you can see the lighting has completely changed and the shadows have completely changed, and you can see we're getting some quite nice sharp shadows here, and this is just from one light, which is incredible. I mean, if you think about the amount of setup that some other systems need, it's really nice. So to get rid of this grain, we will just increase samples, and it doesn't increase the render time that much, and you're pretty much done. Okay, so now that we've seen this, let's change this back to the background image and carry on. So I'm just going to select the light. So looking at the render, if we look at our geometry, you can see it's not smoothed at the moment, it's quite rough. So you can see the knife here is very square. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all this geometry apart from these cheese cubes and the chopping board, and we're going to smooth everything. So what we could do is we could just press 3 on the keyboard and use the regular Maya smooth, which is works just fine. But generally in production we don't usually use that, because if I had a bunch of objects in the scene, it's got to calculate that while it's playing it, so I wouldn't do that. In this scene it would be fine. So let me show you the Arnold way of doing things, which will subdivide that at render time. So it's going to smooth that at render time, and so it looks rough in the viewport and it'll be nice and fast, but when it renders it looks great. So let's select all of our objects. In fact, let me just show you the first one, and then we'll do multiple objects at the same time. So if I select the knife, for example, and go to the shape node, if you go to the Arnold parameters, and these are all Arnold related attributes that you can set. If you scroll down to subdivision, you can see it's not subdivided by default, and all we have to do is change that to Catmull-Clark or Cat-Clark, which is the pretty much industry standard for smoothing. And then we can change this for the amount of times we want to smooth. In this case it's set to 1, which is probably not enough, so let's just change that to 2 just so it's nice and smooth. And then when I render that, it's going to be nice and smooth, so let's just have a quick look at that. So there you go, nice and smooth compared to this. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to do that with multiple objects at the same time. So I'm going to just select all these objects, including the cheese and the wine. Remember, the wine has got objects inside there as well. And anything else? That's it. Okay. So don't do these cheese cubes because we don't want them to be smoothed. And then what we'll do is we'll go to Windows, General Editors, Attribute Spreadsheet, and inside there, what we need is the shape node. If you look at this, this is the transform node. So we're just going to click here inside this view, and then click on the down key on the keyboard, the down arrow, and that will select the shape nodes. And now we can select, if we go to all, we can see the parameters that we just set. So if we just scroll over and get to the Arnold parameters, the Arnold parameters are AI parameters. And if we just go to the subdivision, you can find that here somewhere. Okay, so here we are, AI subdiv type, and it's set to none. One of these is smooth, grapes, looks like. Okay, but so most of these are not smooth at the moment. So if we want to select all those at the same time, we just click on the column, and then we can type in what we want. And you can use numbers instead of typing out cat Clark. So you can type in 0 for none, 1 for cat Clark, and 2 for the linear mode. So what we'll type in is 1 on the keyboard and press enter. And now you can see that's all set to cat Clark. And then if you want to change the amount of subdivisions, we can do that as well. I'm just going to do it, I'm going to change it to 2 because it's just to make things a bit smoother. And then we'll render this to see how it looks. Also, the area light is hidden as well, so let's just unhide that again. Just go to the outliner and just unhide that. Okay, so that's much better. Grapes nice and smooth, and our objects here nice and smooth as well. So to end this lesson, we're just going to show you what it looks like if it was a little bit less grainy. So you can see here we're getting quite a lot of grain, and it's difficult to see sometimes what's going on. And generally what I like to do is set up the lighting with very low settings so that you get instant feedback, and so you can move the lights around nice and easily and change the colors, etc. And now that we've got that the way we like it, we can change this to a little bit higher resolution. So if you select your area light, a lot of this stuff is this grain is in the shadows. Okay, so the thing with tuning inside Arnold is you have to see where the grain is, and where the grain is coming from here is mostly these area shadows you can see, and it's pretty bad. So what we can do is change this quite simply to samples of 5, for example, and it's going to change this quite a lot without much render time. You can easily change this to a smooth result by changing the anti-aliasing settings in the render settings, but that's going to increase the render time as well. So at the moment we've got 12 seconds. Let's take a look at how long that takes once we've changed that samples to 5. Okay, so that's finished now, and it's 29 seconds. So you can see it does obviously make a difference in terms of the render time. It's over double the render time, but it has significantly reduced the grain in the scene, especially around here, and it looks a bit more consistent. So what I mean is the grain is all over the scene, and it's not just in the shadows. Okay, so once we get to that level, we can then start making overall changes and adjusting these. We're not going to go over this in more detail in this lesson. We'll go over this later, but if you do want to see a nice smooth version of this temporarily, you can just come to your Arnold settings, change this to 5 for example, and I'll just show you what that looks like. I'm going to change this back in a minute, but just to show you that we can have a smooth result. Okay, so that took 1 minute 16, and you can see that it's a lot smoother comparing this and this. So we can get a smoother result, and we can even increase it a bit more in the diffuse bounces to decrease the graininess in the bounce light there as well. But we're going to tune all that later. So So in this lesson we had a look at the lighting. We created a light, an area light, we scaled it up so we get a nice soft result, moved it to the side, created a sky dome and added a picture to that so that we get some nice bounce light, some coloured bounce light. And then we increased the anti-aliasing to make it nice and smooth, and we also smoothed the geometry using the Arnold parameters.